I never imagined that a simple weekend with friends would turn into something so disturbing. The idea was just to relax, enjoy the countryside house, breathe in the fresh air of nature, and have good meals. We decided to rent a remote house on Airbnb, one of those isolated places surrounded by trees, with an amazing view of the countryside. The perfect kind of place to disconnect from the city. When we arrived, everything seemed perfect. The house was huge, well decorated and cozy. The kind of place that makes you feel at peace. But right at the first dinner, something strange happened. The hired chef, who was supposed to prepare a special meal, arrived at night as agreed. But the first thing that bothered me was the fact that he didn't say a word about who he was. He didn't introduce himself properly, didn't ask our names, just went straight into the kitchen and started working. In the first few days, everything seemed fine. The food was delicious, and the nights went by with laughter and good company. However, gradually the chef started acting more and more strangely. He began arriving later, well past the agreed time, always around 9 or 10 p.m. At first, I thought it was just a delay, maybe traffic problems or some unforeseen issue. But as this continued, the discomfort started to grow. What really made me suspicious was the fact that he seemed to know specific details about our routine, like where we were or what we were doing, as if he had been watching us all the time. I clearly remember one night when he entered the room and, with a strange smile on his face, commented that we had gone for a walk around the house, something I hadn't told anyone. The scariest part was that no one else knew about it. At first, I tried to ignore these thoughts and figured I was being paranoid. After all, he was a hired chef, and maybe he knew a bit about our preferences since the host had shared some information with him. But when he started making more specific comments about our behaviors, like the way each of us reacted to jokes or the conversations we had among ourselves, the discomfort became impossible to ignore. I didn't know what to think. The chef hadn't been rude or threatening, but there was something about his presence that didn't feel right. One night, after dinner, I was alone for a few minutes in the living room, and I could hear him murmuring something quietly while he was in the kitchen. When I went in there, he instantly stopped talking, and his expression changed, as if he had been caught off guard. But the worst was yet to come. That's when we began noticing small, strange things around the house. On my morning walks, I noticed that some of the windows were open, even though we had closed everything before going to bed. Once, when I went to the bathroom, I saw tape stuck under the sink, as if it had been recently moved. Something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. We decided to investigate a little more, but nothing could have prepared us for what we found. One night, while everyone was distracted, a friend of mine, who was very curious, went to check out the rooms and common areas of the house. That's when he found the cameras. They were in every corner, in the living room, the kitchen, even inside the bathroom. We didn't know whether to be shocked or angry. The chef had installed hidden cameras in places that clearly weren't meant to be filmed. He knew all of our movements, our habits, even what we talked about in private conversations. The feeling of invasion was unbearable. We immediately confronted the chef. He tried to justify himself by saying he was just worried about our safety, and that the cameras were meant to monitor the house while he prepared the food. But the excuses didn't make sense. Why was he watching us to that extent? The strangest part was that he seemed to really know where each of us was, as if he was closely following everything. It was as if he was enjoying our reaction. He even tried to minimize the situation, saying it meant nothing, and that it was just a way to ensure our stay was perfect. But the truth was, the more he spoke, the stronger the feeling that I was being manipulated became. The atmosphere in the house turned heavy and uncomfortable, and we all wanted to leave as soon as possible. After calling the police and reporting what had happened, we found out that the chef had a history of suspicious behavior. He had worked in other places and apparently had been fired for similar reasons, but no one had ever made the connection between him and other incidents. He was arrested for invasion of privacy and for installing cameras without permission. The most disturbing thing was finding out that he had done this several times before, in other rental homes. And the worst part, he had never been discovered until then. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't found the cameras in time. The feeling of being watched, of having been invaded, still haunts me. I don't know if I'll ever feel completely safe in a place I don't know well again. I don't even know where to begin. I feel like I still can't fully process what happened, as if the fear is still creeping inside me, leaving me tense even after all this time. My boyfriend, Mateus, and I had planned this trip with so much care. We decided to rent a secluded country house, far from the city, to have a peaceful weekend. Just the two of us, nature, and a tranquility that seemed within reach. The listing online showed everything we wanted: a comfortable house, surrounded by trees, with a spectacular view. There was no way it could go wrong. But something was wrong from the start, and I didn't know it. On the second day there, he appeared. A strange man, with a simple appearance, but always carrying a camera. At first, I thought he was some kind of local visitor, but soon he introduced himself as a photographer. He said he had been hired by a tourist agency to take photos for a catalog, and that, by coincidence, he was there at the same time as us. Of course, I found it a little odd that he appeared like that, but since he seemed so calm and explained everything so naturally, I accepted it. I never imagined that this photographer, looking like such a nice guy, would start everything that happened afterward. He began appearing every night, always after sunset, saying he was there to capture the house at the perfect moment. It was always a different excuse, like the night light or the shadow of the trees. Mateus and I started to find it strange, but at the time, we tried to dismiss it, thinking he was just doing his job. The oddest part was the fact that he always insisted on taking photos of us, even without asking. A photo of the couple to capture the spirit of the place, he would say. Mateus, who has always been more suspicious, was starting to get uncomfortable, but I still tried to find a logical explanation. Then one night, he asked a question that sent chills down my spine. "How was dinner last night? You were on the porch, weren't you?" I hadn't said anything about it to him. How did he know? That's when I began to realize he wasn't just taking pictures of the house, but of us too, without us knowing. And worse, he was becoming more and more present. Every night, he would ask something more personal, something only someone who was watching would know. It was no longer possible to ignore. The next morning, we decided to look around the house to try to understand what was going on. I had a knot in my stomach, the feeling that something was wrong intensifying with every passing second. What we found left me completely speechless. Photos. Lots of photos. Photos of other couples, other guests, but not ordinary photos. They were photos of private moments, as if he had been watching us without our knowing. Some were even taken in the bathrooms of the house, where no one would imagine there could be someone hidden. When we found the photos, I felt the weight of a strange and uncomfortable truth. He had captured intimate details of our stay, moments that hadn't even been shared between us, as if he were everywhere at once. It was now clear that the photographer wasn't just there to do his job, he was watching us. But the strangest part was discovering that the photos he took, not only of us but of all the other guests, seemed to be taken strategically, as if he were documenting our reactions, our most intimate gestures, our private conversations, everything. And the worst part of all was that these photos were never published. With every image we discovered, I kept asking myself, why was he doing this? What did he intend to do with those images? That night, the photographer appeared again, as if it were part of the routine. But something was different. He seemed more confident, even more natural in his approach. I went to the front door and, with my voice trembling, told him that we knew about the photos. He smiled, a smile so cold that it made me freeze inside. "Ah, so you finally found the photos." I knew it would just be a matter of time. He didn't seem the least bit surprised, as if he had been expecting it. I asked him why he was doing it, and his answer took my breath away. It's an obsession, but an obsession with perfect moments. Capturing something real, without masks. He then turned and walked away, without a final word, simply heading into the darkness of the night. We never saw him again. But to this day, every time I pass by a window, I feel the sensation that he's still out there, somewhere watching. I never thought that a simple walk through an isolated village could make me feel so suspicious and scared, but looking back now, everything seems so innocent at first. My group of friends and I decided to spend the weekend in a countryside house, escaping the hustle and bustle of the city. The house was beautiful, located on top of a hill with a view of the mountains, and the host, a man named Marcos, greeted us with a wide smile and a friendliness that almost seemed exaggerated. He was the type of person who made you feel at home right away, which made us feel comfortable quickly. On the first day, he suggested we take a nighttime walk through the mountains. He said he knew the path well, and would show us some lesser-known spots in the area. We agreed without hesitation. The walk started off calmly. Marcos was always ahead, pointing out details of the landscape and telling us stories about the region, but as night fell, the questions he asked started to get strange. Initially, he asked where we were from, what brought us there, and even about our jobs, normal things. But then, he began asking more personal questions. almost as if he were trying to learn details about our private lives. Who are the most important people to you? What would you do if you had to leave everything behind and start over? I couldn't understand why someone would be interested in such things. I tried to be polite and answered, but he seemed to be getting more insistent. When I asked about the way back, he just smiled and said we still had a lot to explore. At that moment, I started to feel uncomfortable, but I thought I was overthinking it. When we finally returned to the house, it was already past midnight, and I was exhausted. The discomfort I felt during the walk was still with me, but I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself that Marcos was just a strange guy, maybe lonely, trying to be friendly. However, as we were getting ready to sleep, one of my friends mentioned that Marcos had asked him strange questions too, especially about our routine and the times we usually went to bed. This made me remember that, before we left for the walk, he had asked if we locked the house door at night. At the time, I thought it was just small talk, but now, connecting the dots, a chill ran down my spine. The next day, we decided to explore the village on our own, and avoided calling Marcos. But as we walked down the narrow streets, I noticed something strange. Some houses had cameras pointing toward our accommodation. I could swear I saw a small lens glinting between the trees nearby. I approached quietly, and when I got closer, I confirmed my fear. It was a security camera, hidden among the branches. The strangest part was that it seemed to be positioned to watch our house. I pretended I hadn't seen anything and kept walking, but my heart was racing. When we returned, I decided to take a look around the house. That's when I realized there were more tiny cameras embedded in the wooden walls, all aimed at the common areas. My stomach churned instantly. I called the others and showed them the cameras, trying not to panic. No one wanted to believe it, but when we looked closer, we found at least 4 of them. One pointed at the living room, another at the kitchen, and 2 outside, pointed directly at the bedroom windows. Who put these here? And worse, why? It didn't take long for us to remember Marcos's cabin, which was just a few meters away. Something told me he knew much more than he let on. That's when one of my friends suggested we go over there to get proof. I didn't want to get involved any further, but at the same time, I needed to know. We arrived at Marcos's cabin trying to act casual, as if we were just exploring the area. We knocked on the door, but no one answered. My heart was pounding in my chest when one of my friends, more impulsive, tested the doorknob. It was unlocked. We hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of us. When we entered, the smell of mold and old wood filled the air. In the corner of the room, there was a cluttered table with papers and electronic devices. And then we saw it. A monitor turned on, with several windows open, displaying live footage of our house. We saw ourselves there, in real time, from different angles. We felt a shock run through our bodies. He had been watching us the entire time. Immediately, someone turned off the monitor in a hurry, as if doing so would erase what we had just seen. But the shock was already done. We began searching the cabin for more evidence, feeling the panic rise with every passing second. We found an unlocked cabinet with dozens of USB drives and memory cards, all labeled with dates. Some had handwritten names, others just numbers. We grabbed one and connected it to the laptop on the table. What we saw was even worse than we had imagined. It was footage of other guests, people who had been there before us. Videos from inside the rooms, the bathroom, and the outdoor areas. Unaware people, changing clothes, sleeping, talking. My whole body was shaking. It was like being in a horror movie, only real. We didn't know how long this had been going on, or how many victims had passed through here without ever suspecting. That's when we heard footsteps outside. The sound of dry leaves being crushed made my heart nearly stop. Marcos was coming back. In a desperate instinct, I pulled out my phone to call the police, but the signal was too weak. We had to get out of there before he caught us snooping around. We signaled to each other, and in silence, we started moving toward the door. The problem was, what if he already knew we were inside? We tried to leave as quietly as possible, but the tension made our movements clumsier than usual. The sound of footsteps outside stopped, and for a moment, I thought maybe Marcos already knew we were there. I held my breath, hoping he would move on, but then the doorknob turned. My heart raced. Without thinking twice, I pulled my friends behind a large piece of furniture, trying to hide us in the darkest corner of the room. The door creaked as it opened slowly. Marcos entered, stopped for a few seconds, and turned on the light. We could hear the tense breathing of my friends around me. He walked over to the table, fiddled with the laptop, and suddenly let out a heavy sigh. We didn't know if he had noticed something strange, or if he was just checking to see if everything was as he left it. But then, he turned abruptly and left the cabin, closing the door behind him. We waited a full minute before gaining the courage to move. We needed to leave, and fast. But what would we do with all of this? Take the USB drives? Report it? What if he had accomplices? We were isolated, without signal, and any wrong decision could cost us dearly. We waited a few more minutes, trying to listen if he had really left. No one dared speak. We just exchanged nervous glances in the dark. Then, we heard the sound of his car engine starting, and the headlights illuminated the cabin for a few seconds before disappearing down the dirt road. Marcos had gone. It was our chance. We grabbed the USB drives, turned off the computer, and left as quickly as possible, not looking back. The way back to our house seemed even longer than before. Every shadow in the forest seemed to hide something or someone. As soon as we entered the house, we locked all the doors and windows. No one could sleep. We plugged the USB drives into our phones to try to see what was on them, and what we found was worse than we had imagined. Dozens of videos and photos of other tourists. People sleeping, talking, showering. Some files were from years ago. Marcos had been doing this for a long time. It was impossible to know how many victims he had spied on. But the worst came when we found a video from that same night, filmed from the outside of our house. He filmed us through the windows while we were discussing him. At that moment, panic truly set in. He had been there, watching us while we talked about him. Maybe he heard everything. Maybe he was waiting to see our reaction. We turned off our phones and covered all the windows with whatever we could find. No one wanted to be seen. The thought that he could come back at any moment paralyzed us. What if he knew we had taken the USB drives? What if he was watching us now from some dark spot in the forest? We sat there in silence, each of us processing what we had just seen. Then, a sound broke the silence of the house, a car approaching. The headlights illuminated the room for a fraction of a second. We couldn't see the car, but we knew someone was out there. The engine turned off. No knock on the door, no footsteps. Just that suffocating silence. Was it him? Did he notice? We remained motionless, not knowing what to do. Time seemed to stop. No one wanted to look out the window. The only thing we could do was stay there, waiting, listening for any sound that might give away movement outside. But there was nothing. No footsteps on the porch, no attempt to open the door. Just the invisible presence of someone we knew was there. It wasn't until the car engine roared back to life that we dared to breathe again. The headlights cut through the darkness once more, and then the car left, disappearing down the dirt road. No one slept that night. At the first light of dawn, we grabbed our things and left as quickly as possible. We didn't say anything to the homeowner, didn't want to give any hint that we had discovered something. We just left. When we reached the nearest town, we tried to access one of the USB drives on a laptop. The main file was corrupted. The others were just audio recordings, but strangely, none of them had voices. Only the sound of the forest at night. To this day, we've never been able to understand what he really wanted. All we know is that we'll never return to that place.